web, and I only have eyes for you. You. Yes, hello to everybody out there. And I think it's just one person. That's probably you, Spathiwa. But yes, hello. Welcome to the. Oh, that's nice. So we were having some argument today that we did an AMA on the Real MK Ultra Discord, and people were saying that there was not enough MK Ultra discussion on it. I don't know. We took questions for like an hour. People didn't really ask about MK Ultra. They wanted to talk about white replacement and some other conspiratorial type things. But yeah, Jubird and Spathiwa made up there. So what in the world? Yeah, I'm looking at this image of a dog fighting against a suction cup. This is the greatest. It's like a bull terrier. Oh, hold on. Let me see if I can link this in the chat or whatever. Everybody should see what the fuck I'm talking about. Oh, I can't. Wait, maybe I can send it. Yes, it has an enter button. There we go. So I just sent the GIF. That's fucking amazing. I wonder if that shit would work with my girl's dog. She has hardwood floors. So Jubird says, I realize that too, Lodi. That's why I got upset and tuned out. It's very disrespectful for survivors of such atrocities to be reduced to a meme. Let me, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, keep in mind, MK Ultra is kind of a meme. There's not a lot of hard evidence of a lot of the claims of the people in the program. I mean, it's worth considering. I don't know whether it's true or not there. I'm definitely willing to entertain discussion on it. But yeah, and like one guy did call in who was explicitly like a believer in MK Ultra, and he mainly just wanted to call out Jubird's site Deprogram Wiki. He said that Jubird was an unwitting agent. One of the things I love about conspiracy theories is if you're a conspiracy theorist and you have like an interpersonal dispute with another conspiracy theorist in the thing, you just say that they're an agent of the conspiracy that you're worried about. It is wonderful, you know, like you just decide that everybody is working against you, and then you don't have to think. So shout outs to that right there. I also don't like the guy who is anti Jubird. So for those of you out there, Jubird is the name of a chatter out here. He is Jewish. He's also part bird. So yeah, what a strange situation I have there. Is that a pretty good day? I'm still sore all over. I can mostly extend that arm. I got a massage from my girl yesterday. It helped a tremendous amount, but then we fucked and like immediately all those massage gains were gone because I just used all those muscles too much. But yeah, still like relatively hurting from like a small workout too, with just like some 25-pound dumbbells. And the girlfriend was like, 25 is too much. And I was like, 25 doesn't feel like anything. But it feels like something now. So yeah, she suggested I take a class or something to get the right form for lifting, which is probably a good idea, honestly. Just watching little tiny videos on my iPhone might not cut it. So I had a productive day yesterday of hanging out with her. We got some editing done. Didn't I sent Spathiwa the files for that old Rapasaurus? God, what a clusterfuck that might be. Just going through all that nonsense there. I don't think he can even figure out which ones are like my current revision, because I didn't even know when I looked at them. So at some point today, I want to take a look at those, try and get an idea of which had my best ideas. I had this idea that all the rules would fit on one double-sided sheet of paper, and it's quite hard to fit into that constraint right there. Hell yeah. The fight is going on still in the LRH chat. Well, let's hop down to it. I know the identity of the only person here, so we don't have to do like a recap of that or anything. Let's see what our boy Baudelaire has to say for us. The rebel. An angry angel plunges out of the sky, grips the sinner's hair and shakes him hard, shouting, "Hear and obey. It is the law. I am your guardian angel. Do my will. Learn that you must love with all your heart the poor in body and spirit, the low, the lost, so that your charity may spread for Christ a proper carpet when he walks the earth. Such is true love. Before your heart goes numb, let the glory of God awaken it to joy, for that alone among your pleasures lasts. And the angel, punishing to prove his love, torments the victim with his giant fist. But still the damned soul answers, I will not. Damn. Mm. Oh shit. We did a mass highlight telling everybody that we're live on the editing stream. Well, that should work. Immediately we have 4 viewers. Hell yeah. Let's get to editing. All right, so this is chapter 54. We just got through chapter 53, which is the hospital scene with young Radomir. Just got his ass kicked, presumably by Malcolm Lewis. What do we have here? Oh shit, I forgot to Spathy Waff, you could topic the live thing right there. And then we're gonna maybe we should build this as like AMR, SMR. Should I have like some synthesizers or something in the background? Like chapter 54. I'm just out here with my fucking didgeridoo. Hell yeah. So let's get down to it. This is chapter 54. We're nearly halfway in terms of the book. If we can get up to 400 pages, we will be halfway through this book. And even if we get to 395, we will be halfway through this book. So let's see what we can do this morning. It really depends on how well written the chapters are. So, anticipation sang between Freya and Dan the whole way home. Jeanette and Tate were in the back seat. Dan had agreed to give them rides. Brad had taken Cam. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So yeah, here we have Jeanette and Tate were in the back seat. Tate was firing off questions about Riley Halstead, and Jeanette fielded them diplomatically, trying to hint that it wasn't happening. Tate was oblivious. They all shook their heads after they dropped him off. How could he not know? Okay, so I think it's clear in the action that Tate is dropping these people off at their houses. So Cam should willingly go with Brad. It's 2020. Yeah, I think we might get into some of that action later in the story. We'll have to see there. How could they not know? How could he not know? They dropped Jeanette off next. Yeah, actually, Dan. Dan dropped Jeanette off next, and she smiled and waved at them as she smiled at them as she waved goodnight. Finally, it was just Freya and Dan. Her heart was a two-step of elation into apprehension. Freya was glad. Let me see. Freya was glad it was a long way home. I like her, Freya said as they backed out of Jeanette's driveway. Yeah, she's like really genuine. You think there's any hope with Brad? No, I don't like that voice. Yeah, she's like really genuine. Do you think there's any hope with Brad? Not really, Freya admitted, shaking her head. Who knows, though? Maybe she can break through his shell while he's hurt. That was the most emotional I've ever seen him. Dan hesitated a moment before replying. I'm sorry he's hurt, but I think it's gross that he hit Jane. Really fucked up, Dan said. Something was wrong. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, let's just check that out. There was something raw in his voice. Not that he deserved to get beaten or anything. I just don't like it. Freya nodded, about to say something in agreement, but then she stopped herself. She didn't agree at all. She was about to go along with Dan's opinion just because she liked him. It would be so easy to just go with the flow. She could see herself drifting down that path, becoming one of those complacent girls whose identity was subsumed by the person they were dating. Was that what she was really like? Freya probed at the feeling, trying to tell if this was a bruise at her edge or rot at her core. That isn't me. I'm not sad he did it, Freya said, and as she spoke she could feel certainty hardening in her mind. She wasn't some groupie. You think it's okay he hit a girl? Dan said, his eyebrows slanted in confusion. No, I don't think it was right, but I'm glad he did it. I was in a hole and I couldn't fight back. And she knew. She just kept jabbing at me. It was vile. I'd rather get punched. At least that's honest. Dan nodded. She could tell he didn't know what to say. We used to be friends. She didn't used to be that way. She really changed. Mm-hmm. We used to be friends. Jane didn't used to be that way. She really changed, Freya said. The words were bitter in her mouth. I didn't really think of it like that, Dan said, still uneasy. It just feels wrong to me. I would never do that. Well, it's not like he was some huge dude beating up a girl half his size either. Radomir is tiny. Radomir is tiny. I'm sure Jane outweighs him. There was silence between them. There was silence between Dan and Freya. The engine rose. I wonder if it's worth considering whether we should always put it as Freya and Dan rather than Dan and Freya. Yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion on that one. Um, yeah, it really is. It's like one of those things that comes up all the time. Let's leave it like this. The engine rose as the car climbed the hill to Freya's house, and the heaters sighed dry air at them. We don't need at them. Freya wondered if she should have just gone along with him after all. Uh-huh. Freya wondered if she should have said anything. What did it matter what she thought? For all her grandstanding, she'd been letting Dr. Garbuglio and some rock from outer space tell her how to feel for weeks. Without the starball, she wouldn't even be here. She would have vanished into the hole at the top of her dreams, and her body would be washed up on the riverbank. Sorry, Dan said as they pulled into her driveway. I didn't mean to get so heavy. I wasn't there. I don't know why I'm being so judgmental. I get where you're coming from. Freya stopped short as Dan hit the brakes. As his headlights swept over the house, the shadows were all wrong. There were lines that didn't belong. It took a second to realize they were letters. Dripping backs, they were letters. Black lines of spray paint dripped all over the white doors of the garage. The fuck? Dan said. The fuck? Oh, yeah. What the fuck? Dan said. Dan breathed. What the fuck? Dan breathed. The lights were on in the living room, and there was another car parked in the driveway. A midnight blue X3. Okay, so we just got to make that note. The X3 is midnight blue. Hell yeah. Because I think I think Lynn Harris's car is a cream and gold trim Mercedes. So those are the two primary cars. All of Freya's all Freya's hopes for tonight died. Lassa was home. In letters 5 feet high, the graffiti read, "Snitch, bitch." Freya wanted to ask Dan to turn around and drive her far away from here. Instead, the front door swung open, and Lassa stood wreathed in light. In her left hand was Randall's gun. "Oh, shit," Dan said quietly, and he took his hands off the wheel and held up his palms. And held his palms up. Yeah. "Lassa, it's me," Freya shouted, but the windows muffled the sound. Freya turned on the console light and waved her hand frantically. Lassa squinted into the night and then waved back with her empty hand. The gun stayed pointed at the ground as Lassa approached the car. Dan rolled down the window delicately. "Hi, Freya. Oh, hi, Freya. Who's this?" Lassa asked, far too calm with the pistol in her hand. Her hair was wet, and there was the smell of soap carried into the car by a gust of wind. On a gust of wind. She'd just gotten out of the shower. "Put the gun away, Lassa," Freya demanded. "Settle down. The safety's on. Hi, who are you?" she asked Dan again. "That's Dan from Krav Maga. He was giving me a ride home." "Hi, Miss Jokla," Dan said. "Please don't shoot. My car leaks enough already." Don't shoot, please. My car leaks enough already." "Ha! Sorry for the poor welcome, Dan. I didn't really... Just trying to get these voices. It's so tough. What do we got there? Big Jiro. Actually, it's called Jujitsu. There's a song where they just say Jujitsu that I've played on the other show a few times. It's fun. All right, hold on. I see a communique in the $1 Million Extreme Network. Oh, no, it's just LRH. It's just like the mass highlight of the other client I have in there. Gay. "Hi, Miss Jokla," Dan said. "Don't shoot, please. My car leaks enough already." "Ha! Sorry for the poor welcome, Dan. I didn't recognize your car. I was afraid you might be our very untalented house painters, back for another coat." "I'm more of a roller and brush kind of guy," Dan said, and Lassa smirked. Dan's wit got quicker when he got more nervous. No, Dan's wit got quicker as he got more nervous. "Come in. We have a lot to talk about," Lassa ordered Freya. She left them there and returned to the house. Freya took a deep breath. "Wow," Dan said, a little stunned by the exchange. "I'm so sorry." "No, it's okay. It's just a little jarring. Are you okay? I can head home if you want." Freya had to make a terrible decision. If she let him go home, she would have to go inside and be alone with Lassa. The thought made her feel terribly small. But if she asked Dan to come in, who knew what Lassa would do? What if she freaked out at Dan and he never spoke to her again? Freya was certain no matter what she chose, everything would come out wrong. "Please don't," Freya said. "Would you come inside with me? My mom can get kind of extreme sometimes." More than anything, she didn't want to face Lassa on her own. Dan nodded slowly. She hoped he understood. "Sure," Dan said. And Freya was so relieved that she leaned over to kiss him. The softness of his lips sang on hers, and she pulled away. Again, there was that doubling feeling, the echo of his uncertainty beneath her own, the feeling of her own lips on his. For a moment, Freya caught Dan's eyes. They were both searching for something. Dan reached out and held her hand. Why did Lassa have to be home? All the things that she'd wanted for tonight were ruined. Her thoughts were smoldering with memories of the dream that morning. Dan's eyebrows raised as if he knew what Freya was thinking. It was suddenly far too hot in the car, and Freya let go abruptly. She catapulted out of the passenger door, welcoming the cold air that washed over her. Inside the car, she could see Dan place both hands on the wheel and draw a deep breath. He shifted his jeans as he climbed out of the car, trying to hide his excitement, but she was feeling everything. It was just like the dream. She reached into her pocket and the star ball was there, hot with purpose. The night was new and awkward, and they walked to the door together. Neither of them was certain what was happening, and neither wanted it to end. Lasse was preparing hot chocolate, which was a serious business in their house. Freya could smell the cardamom pods as Lasse crushed them with the back of her knife. In one saucepan, she was heating milk with the green pods. In a double boiler, she was melting bars of phaser chocolate with unsalted butter. As the chocolate melted and the milk simmered, she broke up a stick of Ceylon cinnamon and ground it finely with a spice grinder. She had the espresso machine heating up as well to froth the milk. Freya and Dan sat on the couch, waiting as she worked, and he looked around the house. Dan sat on the couch, seeming a little awestruck at the high ceilings and expensive furniture. All around the house, Freya could see signs of things Lasse had moved back into place. The dining table chairs lined up just so. The washing machine was running. Lasse had unpacked everything and put it away as soon as she'd come home. Lasse brought 2 cups of hot chocolate over to Freya and Dan. She returned to the kitchen and washed every pot before she joined them with her own cup. There was a little shortbread cookie on each saucer, and she'd poured the froth milk so that each cup had a little heart and rings of foam. Freya inhaled the scent of cinnamon. The smell of this hot chocolate was deeply bound in her memories. The last time Lasse made chocolate, Randall had been here to drink it with them. What do we got here? I dare not highlight on weekdays, but today I was fairly sure that no one had the energy or sobriety to do anything serious in here. Yeah, that's probably true. I don't give a shit about a mass highlight, you know? If you're in Pound LRH, probably you want to be involved in the crazy shit that I'm doing. I drank. Yeah, I'm feeling a little woozy this morning. I don't know what the fuck is going on. Maybe it's the Niagen kicking in. I think I didn't take it yesterday. I was wondering if it had contributed to the unusual injury from weightlifting, but I think I just went too far. What's LRH? L. Ron Hubbard is my mentor in this writing game. This is the fanciest hot chocolate I've ever had, Dan said. He seemed hesitant to even drink it, and Freya couldn't help but grin at him. He was like an alley cat sniffing at a handout. At last he took a sip and his eyes lit up. This is so good. Is there chai in it? That's the cardamom. The chocolate is phaser and cinnamon from my hometown of Vanta. They make an excellent salmiakki also. What's that? Dan asked, with a thin mustache of cinnamon speckled foam on his upper lip. Salty licorice, Freya grimaced. Is really gross. It is a strong flavor for strong people, Lasse replied. She settled onto the chair across from them. Even in the way she moved, Freya could see that something was different. The overwound tension in her steps was gone. The most dangerous part of Lasse was dormant, for now. Now, who has painted our garage so poorly? Freya began to explain, and Lasse asked many questions. She was taking notes. Here and there she would tap a detail into her phone. Dan seemed a little uneasy with the interrogation at first, but he could not avoid being swept into it. If Freya could not remember a detail, Lasse would turn her gaze on him. If Freya couldn't remember a detail, Lasse would turn her gaze on him. Lasse wanted exact details about everything. The make of Malcolm's car, the clothes he wore, the time that he'd arrived at the party. There was something comforting about how thorough she was, like everything would be set to right if they only told her everything. Lasse clicked her tongue at the part about Jane confronting Freya in the hall and shook her head. Freya knew exactly what her mother was thinking. Freya knew exactly what she was thinking. She thought her mother was thinking. She thought Freya should have stood up for herself and been the one to knock Jane down. Lasse wouldn't bring that up with Dan here. When Freya got to the part about Radomir getting attacked, Lasse set her saucer down and her hands clenched into tight fists. Mida Vieta, she exclaimed angrily. Do not translate that, she shot at Freya when she saw Dan's look of confusion. So this imbecile slashes your tires, he puts a child in the hospital, and now he has time to spray paint our house? Why have they not arrested him? It's nearly an hour since I called. Where are the police? They're looking for him. He hasn't come to school since the beating. What about the girl who hit you and threw the rock? Any more trouble? Lassa asked, and Freya shook her head. She knew Lassa was itching to call Lynn Harris and raise hell. Mm. Yeah, I kind of like the Lassa character. What a cunt. And like in the best possible sense of that word, which honestly I've always thought that like I've always liked the sound of that word as a straight positive. It's a shame that like now it like between um sort of the first time I can remember thinking that word was in I think it was while masturbating in like 1989 or something like that to I don't know what the fuck it was. Maybe like pools of radiance or something like that. Um but like yeah, and it just had like a kind of soft and delicate resonance to it there. And it's really become much more of a slur um in the time between 1989 and 2020. In just 30 short years, cunt has really become like a terrible thing to say. Uh, let's see. Radomir's father, Dymek, was one of. Radomir's father was Dymek was one of Lassa's drinking buddies. They watched soccer together. That comma should be a period, or if you're a true homosexual, a semicolon. Yeah, you know, honestly, a semicolon is like having a dick halfway up your ass. That's why they call it a semicolon, because it's like halfway to your colon. Yeah, it's true. That is a semicolon thing. Uh, yeah, because it's a new subject and predicate. Fucking semicolons. I don't know, where are you at, Energy? Like I'm so wiped the fuck out, but I went to bed at like 8 p.m. And most of it is just like the neck injury, to tell you the truth. But I'm not gonna Steve about it all day or Oz out. I should have taken fucking some aspirin this morning. I might at our next break, I might just take some aspirin. This hooligan better pray the police find him before I do, Lassa concluded. Freya winced. She should have known that was why she was getting grilled. It wasn't an idle threat either. It wasn't an idle threat. Radomir's father, Dymek, was one of Lassa's drinking buddies. They watched soccer together. Freya reached into her pocket for the star ball, wishing she could use it to calm Lassa down, too. It was absolutely possible that Lassa would track Malcolm down. Freya had no idea what would happen next. Would she beat him? Torture him? Maybe even... She might even kill him. There was no way to tell what Lassa would do. How was your hike? Freya asked, trying to get some idea of Lassa's mental state. It was what I needed. I wish I had thought of it months ago. We will talk more about it privately, but I've considered a lot of what you said to me, and I want to apologize for many things. Dan was looking at the door, and Lassa caught his eye and shook her head. We can speak of it later. After I speak with the police, I'm going to sleep for 20 hours. After I talk with the police, I'm going to sleep for 20 hours, Lassa said. We don't need Lassa said. That's good. I'm really sorry for what I said, too. Dr. Garboglio has been helping me a lot, Freya said, expecting that was one of the things Lassa had considered. Still, there was a flash of warning in Lassa's eyes. Dan, Freya began, and then she turned to Dan for approval. Yeah, we need ellipses. Dan, Freya began, and then she turned to Dan for approval. I see Dr. Garboglio too. He's really helped me a lot, Dan said, weaving his words around the tension in the air. Really? I never would have suspected. Why? Lassa asked. Again, there was that accusing tone. She thought it was weak to see a psychiatrist. Like everyone ought to just vanish into the wilderness for weeks and fix themselves. I lost my twin sister 5 years ago, Dan said. His voice was neutral, but there were so many layers of hurt braided into it. They were all caught up in it. They were all caught up in his tone. His voice was neutral. So, they were all caught up. Yeah, I don't think all caught up in his tone really works. I already used a semicolon in this book. This is too much. You're gonna have to split this book into part. I do think this needs to be split into like 2 or 3 books, honestly. But yeah, this is, I mean, it's not at all formatted for a trilogy. And 3 books leaves you with like about 60,000 words per segment there. Yeah, I haven't really considered whether it could be broken into like a series of like 3 250-page books, but it's possible. I don't think really structurally it works. But that is something somebody might try to do from like a marketing perspective, especially if they're trying to target YA, which I don't think you can do with this book because we get so wild. Anyhow. They couldn't help but be caught up in it. Mm-hmm. I lost my twin sister. Okay. I lost my twin sister 5 years ago. Dan's voice was neutral. Yeah, so. Dan's voice was neutral, but there were so many layers of hurt braided into it. Freya and Lassa couldn't help but be caught up. His words struck Lassa like a blow. The interrogator's mask crumpled. It's better now, but for a few years I was in rough shape, Dan said. I'm so sorry to hear that, Lassa said. Her Lassa's mouth was a flat line that trembled as she tried to hold everything down. It's okay, thank you, Dan replied. Silence surrounded them as they all struggled to find words. Lassa was the one who finally spoke. I feel like gravity is broken, and nothing holds together the way it ought to, Lassa said. Freya and Dan lowered their heads. The air was suddenly too full of unspoken words. So this is like a very difficult section right here, like right here to here. It's like a very laser focus on this moment in their conversation. And I think, again, I never want to like surrender or whatever there, but this is one where, in fact, let's flag. Okay. yeah, so we're just gonna add a flag there, because I think that's a place where we need external help to try and get this language right. It's like very confusing, and we're trying to be like quite subtle with some of that stuff, and it's not really working out. So Jira is saying, what do I do to get into the mood to write? Do I have a special place I write, or music, or what? So it used to be that I had to have like this like very elaborate procedure or whatever. Most critical for me is like waking up early in the morning and not like dicking around on my phone or going on Reddit or anything like that. I need to go directly to writing. Like I should really just hop right the fuck out of bed and go write. And I think what we'll probably do, just because I'm having so much success with this stream, is I'm going to start just writing here on stream. And but yeah, like I need to get immediately to there. I used to have music on while I was writing all the time. But on the editing stream, I can't do it, or we'll get copyright flagged by fucking Facebook. And they'll wind up taking down the other streams too from time to time. So unless we just want to be on Twitch and D Live, we can't have music in the background, which might be worthwhile to do that. But like honestly, and in fact, when we do just like the straight writing stream, we'll probably have to do that. We'll probably have to turn off streaming to Facebook and just have this going on the other things. But that's fine. Like I get very little traffic off of Facebook in any case. But yeah, I like to have, usually I just put on like a fucking Pandora station or something like that. I can't be actively involved in the selection of music while it's going on because I don't think about music rather than writing. But yeah, just like immediately getting to it first thing in the morning. And if I don't feel like writing just then, I start editing back to what I've already written to kind of get in the flow of what's writing. And usually like after a chapter of editing, I'm so sick of editing that I'm ready to write. When I was streaming a lot, I would do 2 audio mixes. Yeah, you figured it out. Yeah, like on stream. One of the big things that we're going to have is I'm not going to be talking through the writing stream. Because I like, if you've seen the way that like when I start writing, we're doing like a rewrite on a line, I'll just be like in deep concentration. Editing, I can talk with people and keep up a rapport, and it's kind of interesting. Writing, I can't do any of those things. I'm just coming up with the shit, and I would think that we'll only respond to like chats and stuff like that in we'll only respond to any of that in between chapters, because writing is much more about getting in a flow state and working through it. I don't know if it'll even work on stream, but we'll have to see. But yeah, once this is set up, I'm going to take about a month, and I want to just work on short stories. I want to finish Space Tards, and I have a few short story ideas that I really like to kick out, and we're going to spend about a month, and I'm going to detail my progression of trying to write specifically short stories that I think are good for. I'd like to get something in Clark's World, I'd like to get something in Asimov's, and I'd like to get something in the magazine of science fiction and fantasy. Those are like the big 3 in my eyes. Shout outs to like Astounding and Uncanny, but you guys are not in my eyes the big 3. Nothing against your magazines. I just think those, especially to me, Clark's World is the most prestigious of the magazines. That's the one I'd really like to get into. Shout outs to Neil Clark, who is a real one. I understand he went through some difficult medical shit recently, and like I and the rest of the Brooklyn science fiction writers are pulling for this cat. We run into him all the time at like conventions, and I've gone to like talks that he's given and everything. He really is a real one, and puts a ton of work into his fucking magazine, and you can see it. They've really made like a lot of interesting decisions right there. Never heard of these, and I'm taking notes. Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do. I subscribe to all 3 of those because I want to get stuff in them. So I'm like reading through what's appropriate for their things and trying to like write something that I think is really interesting, but that also fits the tenor of their magazines. Just because like on a career basis, it would be great to get published in these books. And it's not easy. Like some people have been trying for 20 years to get a story in Asimov's. But I'm gonna see what I can do. Maybe I'm not good enough, but I don't give a fuck. But yeah, I have a few ideas for some short stories involving Indian and Chinese mythology. I have ideas for some short stories about automation and like a few political short stories. And like you, yeah, it's wild. But I've actually attended a talk by Neil Clark. He's like, this is the kind of story that I want in my magazine. And the number one thing that he wants is something that he hasn't seen before, which is like a little difficult, right? Because like a lot of ideas haven't come out, and he doesn't want to be able to guess what the ending is. He wants there to be like a strong twist ending in his things, where he goes, "Oh shit, I didn't know we were going there." And those are like relatively difficult things to get into. Um, I would estimate like that if I put like a couple years into full time, or not full time, but into serious short fiction writing, that within a couple years I could, if not into one of those big threes, possibly get some stuff into some of the lesser publications. The Right to Bear Arms was published in the Kaleidocast, which is the Brooklyn speculative fiction writers, their podcast, which is like a paid. I think it counts as an industry publication and so forth. But I know all those people, and I just kind of like I was so sure that I would get into it that I like recorded the audiobook part of it myself. I'm like, here, fucking done, take this. Um, and I also knew like Arms was pretty good, but I could have definitely done a better job in the audiobook recording. So let's get a little past that there. Freya wished she could reach out to her, but as she looked at her mother, she knew it was impossible. Lassa's eyes were distant. She hugged her knees against her chest, a fortress against any approach. They were only an arm's length apart, but there were light years yawning between them. Freya pictured the starball gliding through the void for 100 million years. She and Lassa were on trajectories that would never intersect. I'm going to show Dan my guitar before he heads home, Freya said, not asking so Lassa couldn't say no. Have fun, Lassa said softly. Her eyes were wet as she peered into her empty cup. Oh yeah, so I really like the trajectories that never intersect part of that. I like that Lassa is displaying like some vulnerability after being such a hard ass about the whole thing. And now we're going to get into so I think it's firmly established at this point. Freya and Dan are reading each other's fucking minds. So from this point on, our chapters become much more difficult because now we're leaving regular human discussion, which we already found like relatively, as you can see from the chapter above, it's already hard to write scenes that are emotionally resonant, that have people just talking to each other outright. Now we take that difficulty knob all the fucking way up. Yeah, we're turning it up to 11 right here. As soon as there are not a lot of books involving telepathy, and very few books involving telepathy have direct discussions between characters who are in telepathic communication that really like deal with the emotional aspect of it. And I'll tell you why. It's because it's incredibly difficult to write that in a way that is engaging and that somebody would want to read. And it's entirely possible that I have not done that in this. Like I've set out to do it. I'd be really happy if we've done it, but it's entirely possible that we fucked that up hardcore. So we'll find out. Yeah. But this is the beginning. Chapter 55. So it took 55 chapters to get to this point. But I'll tell you, like, as like the writer here, I feel like if we wanted to get into this really weird territory, we had to spend a lot of time building these characters up. I think at this point, the reader has like a really ironclad idea of who Freya is, like what she's all about. I think like we've earned the right to get weird with her. Not so much Dan. We haven't done like a ton of development with Dan yet, although we've like devoted some chapters into who he is. But if nothing else, I feel like the Dan character is not like really flawed enough. We don't really know at this point in the story like what he wants out of life and everything. We know that Freya is interested in him, but we don't know much about his desires and like what makes him like an interesting person. And so my note for that thus far would be we might need to work a little bit on the Dan character prior to chapter 55 But in subsequent chapters, we do get like a much deeper insight into who he is and what he wants and where he's going in this world. So we'll just have to see. But it is on my mind that potentially we have not earned the right to get into his headspace. But hopefully it'll work out. So, chapter 55. I had no idea how messy my house was. This place is like a museum, Dan said, looking around Freya's room. Freya was sitting on her bed, tuning her ovation. She raised an eyebrow at Dan and started to play Everything in Its Right Place. But Dan didn't recognize the melody or get his little joke. I think there's supposed to be a comma there. It doesn't feel right. But Dan didn't recognize the melody or get her little joke. She felt a pang of disappointment. He wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize a synthesizer line played on an acoustic guitar. She felt a pang of undeserved disappointment. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize a synthesizer line. It's hard to say synthesizer there. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize a synthesizer line played on an acoustic guitar. Yeah, like, oh, that's so hard. Oh, that also hurts. Fuck me. Don't actually do that. Yeah, I'm like a little washed out too on our I'm noticing like when I wear a shirt that's too bright, our colors come out wrong on that. But I don't like want to get up and walk over and fuck with a camera at this moment. God bless coffee. It's actually like waking me up here. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize us. So hard. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize a synthesizer line played on an acoustic guitar. Still didn't get that right. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize a synthesizer line played on an acoustic guitar. Yeah, there's like that little catch. I'm going to give it one more try. It is spelled wrong. Maybe that's why. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize us. No, it's definitely just all right, one more try. Dan wasn't musical. She shouldn't expect him to recognize a synthesizer line played on an acoustic guitar. Got it. Fuck. It's so hard to say. For no reason, too. It's just synthesizer is difficult to nail, and then like leading up to it, I'm like getting some hesitation in my voice because I know I'm gonna say it wrong. Holler. So what do we got here? She finished tuning. Every string was also in its right place. Another fucking semicolon. Half gay. What's your favorite song? Freya asked. Oh, by the way, never ask somebody what their favorite song is. It's always like better to be like, what are some of your favorite songs? Right? Because if you ask for the one, they try to find the superlative and they can't do it. But if they're thinking of a few, like they'll be able to come up with something. And usually it is their favorite song that will be like one of the first 2 or 3 mentioned. But yeah, favorites are like, and then people will do exactly what he does. Oh, I don't really have a favorite. Fuck off. He settled beside her. She reached over and set her hand on his shoulder, just because she could. Dan felt so solid. No, I think he felt so solid is better. He felt so solid. Oh, dreamboat. Split the book again. Oh God, what if a semicolon really did split the entire book into a different fucking book? It's like an ultimate page break. Dan, everyone has a favorite song. Oh, I don't really have a favorite, Dan said. She took her hand back, plucked a harmonic, and stared at him. Dan, everyone has a favorite song. Don't be so shy, she teased. Here in her room, holding her guitar, Freya felt very confident. She could take the lead. So that's like an interesting note about how confidence works between people in their own domains. And I've noticed this, like definitely being in bed with people, like having sex with somebody in your room versus in their room, can just the whole power dynamic can like flip, change upside down. And I'd like to take a minute just sitting right there and tell you all how I became the Prince of Bel Air. It really does change how somebody acts if you were in their room or if they're in a room at your house. People are always at the back of their mind aware of like a power structure of who owns this house, who belongs here, who is a guest, and so forth. And it will change so many things about the way that they interact. It's not something that we're diving deeply to in this book, but it's always something that I find interesting how people are different based on their setting. So I find that like really interesting. Turn all the sex into downloadable content. I thought with Zane and Ink, we really thought about that. We thought about cutting some of the super extreme sex and just having like a PG-13 version and an NC-17 version. But ultimately, we just dismissed it because not enough people were going to read that book for it to make any kind of sense. But I've thought about doing that before. Here and more just like I don't care about people that don't want to read sex. As readers, if you don't like sex in books, find another fucking author. You know, like there's so many good authors out there to spend your time on. I definitely want to have sex in my books. I think it's a fundamental part of the human experience, and I think it's interesting territory to get into. And also, I just want characters to be fucking. You know, I don't want to like wonder what it's all about for my whole life. Like I think it's part of the task of writing some shit. So anyhow, that's my theory. Hold on just a second. Wait, the first funny link that Stovepipe has ever posted, was it the dog? Wait. Oh no. Oh God. Oh, this guy's about to lose some fucking fingers here. Oh, that's awful. Watch the whole fucking car fall on him. Oh, good. He does finally find a tool to pry this shit open with. That's a killer. Yeah, I don't even feel super bad for, like, it's not like that guy fucked up that badly either. Ooh, I hope he didn't lose those fingers. That's not a funny link. Yeah, I feel bad for that dude. The happy ending is that he gets his fingers out of the trunk. Damn. But I agree 100% with Die for RC saying that's like the first funny link he's ever posted. At least he's not like spamming his fucking songs all the time. I found that super annoying. Mm. But oh yeah, and when I'm writing, I don't get to have like those screens up there where I can see the shit that's going on. I think I'm also going to turn off the screen where I can see the image of myself. So it'll just be me focused into the void. Dan, everyone has a favorite song. Don't be so shy, she teased. Here in her room, holding her guitar, HR guitar, Freya felt very confident she could take the lead. It's Angie, Dan said softly. She took a deep breath. For a moment, Freya felt like a fool for pressuring him. No. So back here, I lost my twin sister Angie 5 years ago. Yeah. Dangie and Angie. All right, there we go. Okay, so it feels a little pat that we put it in there. Hopefully, hold on. Let's. Okay, okay. Yeah, so we foreshadowed this earlier, and we're just reminding the reader there that it's Angie because they're not gonna fucking remember that name out of nowhere. It feels a little awkward to put that in, but I think the dividends are there because I didn't remember the whole thing. Angie. So I don't. This is not meant to be that Angie, and they spell their names differently. The reason why we picked this one was just for the scene with the song, right? Um, and like here, the intro to Angie. Let me see. What's the tablature for the intro? Yeah, so we're not gonna do. So there's the tablature for this whole thing. So we got the harmonic on 12. Da, 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 da. Oh yeah, it really is one of the greatest intros to a song of in the whole catalog of rock and roll. Really, really solid intro. And Stones are a solid fucking band, man. It's Angie, Dan said softly. She took a deep breath. For a moment, Freya felt like such a fool for pressing him. She decided to take a chance. Is it okay if I play it for you? Really? Do you know it? I love the Stones. I know a lot of their songs. Freya was making up her mind whether or not she wanted to sing. She was so much more confident in her playing than her singing. She'd been meaning to ask Mr. Mathis to recommend a singing teacher for a long time, but she was almost certain he'd just shake his head and tell her to stick to guitar. Okay, just don't make me cry, Dan joked. No promises, Freya smiled back at him, and she knew right away she was going to sing. She'd watched a few videos teaching the song. She didn't like the ones where singers tried to copy Mick Jagger's intonation. They never quite got it, and it didn't feel honest. And it didn't feel honest. She'd practiced it bare, with no frills or pretense. Mm-hmm. Agreed to me. What do we got there? Freya had practiced the song bare, with no frills or pretense. She hoped it would sound okay. Freya noodled at the opening notes, trying to remember the song. It had been a long time since she'd practiced it. She could almost hear Mr. Mathis telling her to take it easy. Her heart was beating too fast. After a few blunders, she could feel her memory locking into place. She started over. It was such a pretty intro, one of her absolute favorites. The feeling of Dan just inches away on the bed kept intruding, and she shut her eyes, trying to focus on the song. The doubling feeling Freya had felt in the car was sliding in between her thoughts. The sound of the guitar rang at her from two directions at once, and though her eyes were shut, she could still see herself playing. Oh, no, I want that N. That's where we'll break. And though her eyes were shut, She could still see herself playing, the vision as thin as a daydream. Fucking semicolon. Ugh, I just see them everywhere now. I hate it. I hate it so much. She almost chickened out when she got to the first singing part, but the shimmering, flowing feeling was settling over her, and she didn't want it to stop. She could feel Dan's surprise as she sang out Angie. He hadn't expected this, and he was alarmed, afraid of where the music might take him. It nearly made her miss the second Angie, but her fingers knew the way. The notes never faltered. Self-consciousness crowded out the other feelings. She couldn't hit all the notes she wanted to. At places her voice wasn't quite there, and the flaws dug at her. But Dan couldn't hear those notes. He was spellbound. Feeling him swept along with the song let her relax, and the sense of doubling became too strong to ignore. She could feel every breath Dan took. The nervous energy in his fingers, even as hers, danced over the frets. She felt as if the world were split in half. She missed a note, and her eyes opened. She found herself staring at him, overcome. The thin daydream bloomed into a full vision. Her eyes were at once blue and brown. It was as if she was simultaneously looking at Dan and into a mirror. As she took a breath to recompose, he did the same, and there was only one heartbeat between them. For a second, Freya felt harmony between them, a spreading joy in her chest. For a second, Freya felt a harmony between them, a spreading joy in her chest. And each chest. But Dan was afraid. She could feel him trying to peel away, and the link was quivering with strain. Freya wanted the feeling very badly, and she could feel that desire increasing his fear. She took a deep breath and tried to let it go. She needed to find something he could hold on to. A thought sprang into her mind and rippled to his. Think of it like you're running. Together, they watched the mutual surprise register on both of their faces. They were both swirling with thoughts of running, the moment where the pain faded and the noises in their ears grew distant. There was a place where there was only motion, only the desire to continue, something they both sought and understood. Let me see there. My neck. Something they both sought. Understanding was blooming between them. They were speaking the same language now. The unity was returning. When he was calm, Freya began to play. She found the music again and let it carry them both. The starball was burning at her hip, and they both felt it, but there was no room for questions. There was only the song. When Freya finished, there were tears running down both of their faces. They were overloaded. The feeling was too strong for either to hold on their own. She slid the guitar under the bed, and there were memories welling around Dan, surging up from the echoes. He was exposed and afraid. I know, Freya said aloud, little more than a whisper. She was the strong one here, the one who knew the right things to say. Everything was in those two words: relief, acceptance, understanding. They embraced, drawing as close as they could, but it wasn't nearly enough. They were tumbling forward, and they shared a fear that if they began, they could not stop. They were tumbling towards something, and they shared a fear that if they began, they could not stop. Freya, the police are here, Lassa called from the living room, her voice cut through the door. They halted as if they'd been rear-ended at a stoplight. Freya and Dan were blinking at each other. The connection was faltering. They were two people now, sitting on a bed, grasping for something vital they'd lost. What's happening to us? Dan asked, finding his voice before her. I don't know, Freya said. Am I high? Was there something in the chocolate? No. It's something else, Freya began, with a desperate need to tell him everything. But there was so much, it seemed impossible to begin. He could see the images she was drawing up, but he could not understand them. The spell was fading. The last echoes of the doubling were as thin as wisps of smoke between them. Freya caught a last flickering image of a dark-haired girl with her eyes shut, leaning in towards Dan. Alarm flashed in his eyes. He covered his face with his hands and turned away. The rejection was stunning. Whatever that was, he didn't want to share it. Freya took a deep breath. Freya took a sharp breath and found that she was alone. Whew! Lasse was calling to them, but neither could speak. Freya couldn't even move. She felt punctured, like a butterfly pinned in a display. When they didn't answer Lasse's urgent knock, she entered, looking alarmed, and all they could do was stare. Her voice seemed very far away. The starball was burning in Freya's pocket, but it could not reach her. Freya, what's wrong? Lasse demanded, shaking her shoulder. Freya's hand shot up and caught her wrist. Lasse demanded, shaking her shoulder. Freya's hand shot up and caught her wrist automatically. They'd practiced the move over and over again in class. Lasse withdrew in surprise. Lasse drew back in surprise. Everything, Freya replied. Her fingers felt numb as she released her grip. Her fingers felt numb as she released the grip on Lasse's wrist. She could feel a low, distant singing, the spreading calm as the starball began its work. We need a few minutes, okay? Normally, Lasse would have balked at her tone, which was more command than request. Or at Freya. Normally, Lasse would have balked at getting her wrist grabbed, or at Freya's tone, which was more command than request, but nothing about this was normal. Lasse nodded and went back to the door, where the police were waiting. Okay. It's a wonky fucking chapter there, man. Yeah, we're getting into the territory where, like I said, we need somebody like a little bit more skilled than me to wade into some of this, or, I got to take another pass later on. I think we did a little work to improve that there, but let's just fucking, yeah, chapter 55. No, so let's just do final. Yeah, needs another pass. That is maybe not within my power this morning. Hell yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting scene. We're like, maybe it's a little forced. Maybe we're like trying too hard with this scene. I'm not sure that I believe that she like grabs her mother's wrist. Mhm. Lasse's eyes flared with alarm. Normally, she would have balked at getting her wrist grabbed. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's better. And we just need her like, what the fuck? Like, why are you grabbing my wrist? All right, because that ain't normal. So this is chapter 56. And my note was this chapter should focus a lot more on the insight into her age. I think we do an okay job of that note. Like, there are definitely things that I've added. You can see that was within my thinking there. I think it's... When it was clear the policewoman didn't need him, Dan fled the scene in his Toyota. So that may be too much because he's not actually fleeing the scene. We're just using a metaphor. Oh God, who's fucking bothering me here? It's just some. I don't understand people who like on Discord will fucking like try to link you to their little Discord with like 30 people in them if you're not their friend. Like I'm not fucking joining that. You know. Ugh. Can't stand a spamming motherfucker. Okay. Actually, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take uh like 2 minutes. I'm gonna get some aspirin, and I'll bring some of the copies of those magazines for you to take a look at. There. One sec. Ah. Okay. Good God Almighty. All right, so squad goals for 2020. So yeah, here are some of the fucking. So the number one uh, that I'm interested in getting into is Clark's World magazine right here. It's run by Neil Clark, and he really has some of like the most cutting edge science fiction shit happening right here. If you take a look at these are actually printed directly by Amazon KDP, which is the same thing that I use to print like my books. So he has them just drop shipped directly from there. Then there is the magazine of science fiction and fantasy. This is a bi-monthly, or I don't know, like a monthly buy or whatever. It happens every 2 months, right? So they have this is a difficult one to get into. They're all quite difficult to get stories published in. I don't know. I should do a little bit more research to find out what their typical word count is. I know for Clark's World, they're shooting for things in like the 6 to 8,000 word range, which is like a little short for me. Usually it takes me about 10,000 words to get going in a story. But and then Asimov's is another every bi-monthly or twice monthly, or no, twice a month, or once every 2 months. Another one of these right here, and it's just like a classic magazine. Some of the greatest science fiction writers of all time have been up in this guy. So those are the big three. My understanding is they're each like a little bit different. Like you can really hear a different tone in each of the magazines. In the last issue of the museum or magazine of fantasy and science fiction, there was a really good fantasy piece. It was like a fantasy detective type situation. I really liked it so much that I thought about just recording like an audiobook or like an audio copy of it, just because I thought it was so good, and just like reaching out to the writer and being like, "Yo, I just recorded this. You know, I'm just fucking around," as a way to say hi. But uh, yeah, that's like I may or may not do that. I've thought about doing like a just reading stories on Twitch to get better at narration, like late at night. So I might do something like that. I could totally use this thing right here. But as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, how am I gonna, set up the reading, where the microphone's gonna be, and so forth. Um, One thing I've thought about with this stream right here is if we wanted to go more into that like cozy ASMR territory, it might make a lot of sense to just have like a much cozier set here than this like very focused on like it's dark white whatever. But I think we're gonna stick with this for the remainder of the editing thing. I just wonder if like I might set up a reading stream that is like more visually cozy. If we're gonna do the whole like like yeah, we could make this like a little bit easier on the eye. Is my what I'm really getting at there. Mm, good God. But yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, what would a story about? Oh, somebody's complaining about getting pinged in the YouTube chat. They can fuck right off. Oh, why is Dolphin in the chat right there? Ass fingers Godoy. All right, well, what are we at here? So we've been editing for roughly an hour and a half here. Let's try to get through chapter 56 before the end of the day. If we can do that, we'll be at about the halfway point of the book, and we'll do another like word count thing. So that's something that we can look forward to. When it was clear the policewoman didn't need him, Dan fled the scene in his Toyota. What do you think about that? Like, do you understand that he's not actually like running away from the scene, but that he just wants to get the fuck out of there because something really weird has happened to him? Like, I really wonder if that is apparent to readers, because I think that might be too much. Freya watched his taillights vanish into the night. There was so much more to say, if they could ever figure out how to say it. The policeman who took the report seemed more incensed by the vandalism than either Freya or Lasse. She was visibly angry. It reminded Freya of Colin at Bailey Bicycle, so eager for outrage on her behalf. Officer Martin had a volatile, over-caffeinated edge. She wore dark eyeliner and wings that came to little curving hooks at her outer canthi. Maybe she meant to be daring, but in the harsh floodlights, she looked like a vampire. Mm-hmm. Harsh exterior floodlights. She looked like a vampire. Martin directed all of her questions to Freya. When Freya was struggling to remember the time they'd thrown rocks through the Taco Time window at her. Rock throwing incident at Taco Time. I love the Taco Time. Officer Martin directed all of her questions to Freya. When Freya was struggling to remember a detail of the rock-throwing incident at Taco Time, Lasse tried to interject. Martin cut her off brusquely, saying she would get to her next. Freya could see fury kindling in Lasse's eyes, but the policewoman didn't notice or didn't care. Once she was through with her questions, Officer Martin paced back and forth in front of the vandalized garage, drumming her fingertips on the baton clipped to her hip. Finally, she came to a halt and stared at the graffiti for an uncomfortably long time. Wouldn't want to be him, she announced. Malice dripped off each word, like the black rivulets bleeding off the spray-painted letters. I think that is a shitty line there. Malice dripped off each word, like the black rivulets. Yeah, that's a terrible simile. Why would we include that sentence? Wouldn't want to be him, she announced. Malice bleeding from each word. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a little better. It's still kind of fucking ham-fisted when you really come down to it. But let's not forget, this is a science fiction book. We're probably going to be a little ham-fisted at times. I know that anybody who has like any kind of like literary bent is already rolling their eyes at it's like, oh, you think this is the ham-fisted example in the book? But as you were, Freya and Lasse exchanged a look of surprise. Had she really just said that? Had the policewoman really just said that? What was she implying? That they were going to give Malcolm a beating when they caught him? Were they going to shoot him for resisting arrest? Freya wondered how she would feel if they did shoot him, but it seemed too absurd to register. Officer Martin scratched on her aluminum clipboard, taking down the report. When she was done with the form, she rattled off the things she needed to say. They could request a copy of the report in writing at the station. In person at the station. They should contact these numbers if anything changed. They were not to engage if their vandal returned. It all rolled out as one long, frictionless screed, without impact or import. She'd said this all so many times that it was on automatic. When at last it was through and she departed, Freya was glad she was gone. She stood with her mother in front of the garage, staring at the work of an idiot. Was she high? Freya asked, tilting her head in the direction the police car had vanished. Oh, we don't need that. The tilting of the head, totally unuseless. Was she high? Freya asked. Officer Martin had been far too keyed up for a Thursday night. I'd guess Adderall, Lasse said with a nod. Strange woman. Freya put fingertips on the corners of her eyes and shook her head no. Lasse snorted into the night air. I suppose if that's the only makeup you wear, go big. Lasse shook her head. Mm-hmm. 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 So I'd like for her to say something like Lasse sniped, but I don't think you can snipe at somebody who isn't there. Jabbed, bantered, scoffed. Oh yeah, scoffed. It was never hard to figure out who she didn't like. Freya wished she could have laughed, but she only managed a thin smile. It struck her that not too long ago she would have tried to get back into the house as soon as she could, away from Lasse at any cost. But she had no urge to escape now. She was still aware that things could swiftly go wrong, but she wasn't afraid. Freya had grown, or maybe Lasse had diminished. There were other things to worry about now. She kept thinking about the way she'd parted with Dan, the quick hug, the questions they were afraid to ask and afraid to answer. The warmth she'd felt with him had gone numb. She felt severed. Her shoulders were tight with tension, and she had an idea that they'd gotten too close too quickly, and they would never reach that place again. He'd promised to text her when he got home. She was certain he wouldn't. They stared at the door together, lost in separate places. So we need clarity at who stared at the door together. Freya and Lasse stared at the garage. Okay, so here's one note that I would like. I would love for him to have like a spray paint on there. Like I would love for the spray painted thing to not be snitch bitch, which is, what the fuck ever. I would love for it to be a more emotionally resonant dig. Maybe something about how she's a pariah. Maybe something about how her dad is dead. Like something like not enough dead cops or something. I don't know. I would love for, we need to figure out something better for it to fucking say on that garage. Snitch bitch has no emotional resonance. Oh yeah, I love that line. Um, uh, yeah, right there. Uh, Freya and Lasse stared at the garage door together, lost in separate places. The wind was whipping around them, but Freya barely felt the cold. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Dan. Lasse thought all the winters in Maine were a joke. She could stand here all night. She thought that winters in Maine were a joke. She could stand here all night. What a coward, Lasse muttered at last. It reminded Freya of the way Radomir had said it. I don't know why he thought this would bother me, Freya said, indicating the sloppy spray paint. Wow, he knows where I live. We're the only jokeless in the phone book. Lasse nodded. She cleared her throat. The time for levity was through. Until they arrest him, I'm going to leave the gun in the living room in the ottoman. If he tries to get into our house while you're alone, shoot him. I will, Freya agreed at once. Something in the way she'd said it made Lasse stare. The look was unexpected. She thought Lasse would approve. Did she think Freya had gone crazy? It took a moment for Freya to realize it was a look of respect. You're doing so well, Lasse said, her voice low. Freya could hear the unspoken comparison, that Lasse wasn't. She wondered if she ought to bring up the days where the gun was missing from the closet, but she would have to explain why she was poking around in Lasse's room, and it wouldn't help. Only Lasse could fix Lasse. I can paint over that, Freya said, nodding at the garage door. Don't. We don't need that. Don't. I'll just pay someone. I brought this on us, though. It's my problem. No, Lasse said abruptly, a little of her own fire. I brought this on us, though. It's my problem. No, Lasse said abruptly, a little of her old fire returning. Why not? Freya asked. 2 weeks ago, she would have just lowered her head, let the order go unchallenged. She could afford to ask questions now. If you paint this, the whole time you're working, you're thinking about the little shit who's done it to you, giving him your time and energy, even if it's only his hate. I can simply make a phone call and all his efforts are for nothing. We'll have a receipt for the police too, like the bike, Freya added. Okay, you're right, it's a good point. Lasse nodded. Of course I'm right. Freya looked away. They were done talking about Malcolm and now they had to deal with each other. The structure between them had shifted and Freya was unsure how much. You caught a good one. I like him, Lasse said. Freya's cheeks burned and she nodded, hoping that was all Lasse had to say. Of course it wasn't. For your first time, Lasse began. I know, use protection. Freya was sick of hearing it from everyone. What? No. That's a terrible idea. You're old enough and you're on the pill. You only have one first time. Don't waste it. Condoms are wretched. Freya blinked in astonishment. I had a different point to make before you interrupted me. Don't expect it to all go perfectly for either of you. Usually the second time around is much better. Be kind. Anxiety can make man fail to perform. It's nothing about you. Of course, you never have to do anything you don't want to. If you say stop and someone doesn't stop right away, get out of there, okay? Freya was slightly shocked. She hadn't expected to hear that and didn't know what to do with the information that Lasse's first time must have been a mess. You'll be happier if you wait until you're both in love, but if you can't, it's really not the end of the world. It's a small thing, really. You'll be happier if you can wait until you're both in love, but if you can't, it's not the end of the world. It's a small thing, really. But I remember it all felt very important to me at the time. How will I know? Freya asked. You will know. There won't be any doubt in your mind. It will consume everything. If you ever have to wonder if something's love, it isn't. There was a hard look in Lasse's eyes as she said it. They were both thinking of Randall. Even during their worst fights, Freya had never doubted that Lasse loved Randall. In that, at least, they could see eye to eye. Freya stepped forward and surprised Lasse by hugging her. Lasse was stiff at first, her whole body rigid with tension. Freya felt her let go. The walls were all crumbling. Freya was shocked. Mm-hmm. She felt Lasse's chest heaving against her. Her mother began to cry. Lasse's tears brought Freya's, and they wept in the driveway until the wind finally drove them inside. The uncharacteristic closeness didn't follow them in. They broke up on re-entry, each bound for their own room in silent relief. Freya could not tell if they were making progress or if Lasse was simply falling apart. Freya stayed awake until midnight, waiting for a text she was certain would never come. Her eyes kept drifting closed, but before she could drift off, she would blink and check her phone. She felt the starball pulsing warmth in her pocket, but the calming feeling she'd come to associate with its heat never came. She was too tired to puzzle out what was going on. Maybe it was sputtering out. She had no idea what she would do without it, without Dan. There were no good answers. She closed her eyes and slipped into the black. She was through fighting. Sleep was a breath away, but then her phone buzzed against the nightstand and jarred her awake. She'd been waiting for his text all night, and now she was too afraid to look at it. It was a few moments before she could summon the courage to turn it over. She was afraid if she waited too long, he would think she'd fallen asleep and go to bed himself. She flipped the phone over. Can we talk tomorrow? Yeah, so let's... Can we talk tomorrow? And yeah, not italics. Dan, can we talk tomorrow? Dead words written from obligation, like stones scattered across her screen. She felt like something was being ripped out of her. Everything was crumbling into the sea. Why didn't he just tell her it was over? A dozen bitter replies swirled. She was struck with cold anger that Dan kept her waiting for hours just to dump her, as her hand shot into their pocket for the starball. Where is the starball? Her hand shot into her pocket for the starball. She had the sense that she was falling in place and she needed an anchor. Freya felt it burning in her pocket, but there was no relief. Had it burned her out? She had an intrusive wish that For a moment, she wished the starball would let go of all of its power at once. She imagined it consuming her and everything around her in a nova of pure white light. She'd been fooling herself this whole time. She should have stayed in the river. Freya shut her eyes tightly, wishing she'd just gone to sleep. She thudded her head against the headboard, then she opened her eyes and stared across the room. Everything good was bleeding out of her. It's over. The lines of the room began to diverge. She thought her eyes were filling with tears, but they continued to drift. She could recognize the doubling presence from before, feeling from before, but it was different now. But they continued to drift from focus. She recognized the doubling feeling from before, but it was different now. Dan's presence was remote and strained. The sense of closeness she'd felt was absent. Her head pounded with demands, but there was no response from the other side, no echo of her own thoughts. This was a one-way channel. His thoughts were there, but she was boiling inside. It was drowning him out. She had to fight to calm herself. His thoughts were there, but she was boiling with anxiety, and it was drowning him out. Freya had to fight to calm herself. She sucked in air and shut her eyes, trying to still the tumbling wheel of her thoughts. She exhaled slowly and took 3 long, deep breaths. With each exhalation, the connection grew stronger. Now she could see Dan propped up in his bed. She could feel the wood panel wall of the trailer bowing slightly against his back. His room... let's see. Now she could see Dan's bare feet hanging off the edge of his bed. Mm-hmm. Now she could see Dan's bare feet hanging off the edge of his bed. She felt the thin wood panel wall bowing slightly against his back. His room was bathed in the humming yellow light of his computer monitor. Lines of text were scrolling up his screen, but they were inscrutable. He was only barely aware of them. Dan was clicking his phone on and off, staring at the text he sent, and growing surer by the second that he'd fucked up everything. At once, Freya tried to reach out to him, sending him thoughts that it was all okay, but her ideas slid away unanswered. He could not hear them. His unease was deepening. His uncertainty swooped down on him like a swarm, biting pieces of him away. He'd waited too long to reply. He'd acted too weird and freaked her out. She had found him out. She knew. He tensed into a full-body cringe, trying to block the memory out. No, that's not it, Freya mumbled aloud. But he could not hear her. Oh, so she would say that, not mumble it. Said aloud, but he could not hear her, and the sound of her voice distracted her. The tenuous connection was in jeopardy of breaking. She had to fight to hold on, and when she could feel him again, his tangle of worries was whirring outward, looming ever larger around him. Don't go that way, Freya urged, but it was as futile as shouting at a movie screen. She shut her eyes, trying to bring Dan into focus. She could feel the shuddering alignment as his body began to overlap her own. His heart was racing, and her own beat faster, trying to keep up. Dan's breathing was ragged and shallow. He was spiraling into panic, and he was dragging her down with her. Mm-hmm. She found his fear was very different from her own. Freya's fear came as tension in her neck. Hairs rising along her arms and pressure tightening at her temples. Dan's fear was slow and visceral. It rose from a pit in his stomach and spread through his guts like slow hardening amber. It rose from a churning pit in his stomach and spread through his guts like slow hardening amber. She wanted to flee. Freya wanted to escape, but there was no running now. She was down in it. "50% page." Oh yeah, we made it to 50%. Hell yeah. Hell fucking yeah. And when we get through this chapter, we'll see what our word count's at. In like the most ass backwards way possible, because fucking it's so weird that it's like cross documents. Maybe if I like open this document in something with a bunch of screens and then move the monitors around, I can find where, because I think it's just dragged off to the side of the document somewhere. Wait, hold on. Let's try. Yeah, I don't see it anywhere on this fucking screen, man. Yeah, that word count is nowhere to be seen. And Macs are just not good at like recentering everything on the page.
I think there's a way you can do it. There's like a key command or whatever, but I'm not on that right now. Oh yeah, I think you can do command control shift. Was that it? Oh, there's some key command where you like flip the screen, but I don't know what it is. Um, I thought it would be kind of funny to have like the chatting upside down for a second, but we'll. Oh no, it's Windows machines that can do that. Anyhow, Freya's fear came at blah blah blah. Flashes of sitting next to her as she played Angie clawed at him, demanding answers. Why did I feel that way? What's happening to me? Did she know? As Dan struggled for answers, each seemed thinner and weaker than the last, and the conclusion seemed more and more inescapable. I'm insane. Command Shift W. Yeah, that does nothing. Command Option Shift W. What? It just deletes the whole fucking manuscript permanently. Uh, are we even showing the view document count, hide word count? Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, it just doesn't. It doesn't have a word count in this guy. It's such a weird thing in the document. It's like a little annoying thing. Or it may be. Oh, and we tried like definitely removing the HDMI thing. It's just gone. I already tried a bunch of ways to get it back. It doesn't show on another Mac that had like 5 or 6 screens attached to it. So that's just how it is, kids. Okay. Flashes of sitting next to her as she played Angie clawed at Dan, demanding answers. Why did I feel that way? What's happening to me? Did she know? As Dan struggled for answers. Mm-hmm. I'm insane. Dan shut his eyes tightly as the black swallowed him. He was tasting salt, remembering tumbling in the surf. Thoughts crashed over him like waves, and the harder he struggled to rise, the deeper he sank. The petrifying feeling. Oh, yeah, this is too much. Too fucking much here. Tasting salt, tumbling in the surf. Freya felt it all. She suffered inside of him, caught in her skin. The starball saved her. It was burning so hot at her hip that it broke her concentration, and the connection grew weak. With a yelp, she tugged at the fabric of her jeans to get it away from her skin. Far away, she could feel its pulse spreading over Dan's thoughts like a thin sheen of frost, but there was no improvement. The starball's efforts were nothing against his terror. Now she knew why it had been pulsing all night. The starball was trying to hold Dan together. Dan! Freya choked, wondering. Dan! Freya choked, wondering if he was about to have a seizure. This was why the starball had made the connection. It couldn't fix him and it needed her help. She pulled the starball out of her pocket. It was nearly too hot to handle. How do I reach him? She asked, but the orb was mute. Did it not have enough power to bridge the distance? Could she amplify it somehow with an antenna? A moment later, she felt like a fool. Her phone was sitting on the nightstand. Why hadn't she just called him? She reached out for her phone with the other hand. When her fingers touched the case, a thrill ran through her. The feeling shot up her back as a shiver and spread to her chest. Her eyelids fluttered and then her eyes rolled. Yeah, this is too much description. The feeling shot up her back as a shiver. It rushed so strong she nearly dropped her phone. That wasn't her. The sensation was foreign, a tickle in her thoughts. The starball was trying to control her, the same way it had fought when she tried to seal it in her locker. In its haste, it had abandoned all subtlety and pushed too hard. Freya froze. She held the phone in one hand and the starball in the other. It was using her. She thought of the halves of the meteorite buried in her closet. She could seal it away again. She could end this. Her stomach churned in protest as the starball fought for control. Let go, she demanded aloud, her voice ringing back at her from the bedroom walls. She clenched her jaw and her fist closed around the starball. She had a flash of hurling it through the window and into the night, anything to get it away from her. The starball let go. The sick feeling in her stomach was gone. The faltering connection with Dan vanished with it. All the willpower she'd summoned to fight the compulsion tumbled forward, expecting resistance and finding none. Freya blinked, stunned by the abrupt disconnect. Silence engulfed her. She couldn't hear the highway rumble in the background of Dan's room, or the sound of his breathing. Everything in her room was impossibly still. Through the window, the bare limbs of trees were trembling silently in the moonlight. She was alone. She'd made a mistake. The horrible plunging feeling she'd felt on the bench at Grayson returned. She couldn't do this again. She couldn't make it on her own. Come back. I'm sorry, I was scared. She pleaded to the orb in her palm, but there was no response. Please, come back. Freya was begging, but she didn't care. She needed the star ball. Why was she fighting it? She'd already made her choice. She closed her hand around it, unsure if it was growing colder or if that was only her imagination. What do we have here? Later, try unzooming the window and, okay, let's try. Okay, view, hide word count, view. Yannig, let's, that's a teeny tiny thing. Yeah, it's gone. It's gone. I must have done something wrong. Yeah, it's just not there. So shout out to Logic, who is apparently drunk at 6 a.m. in the morning. Logic, thank you so much for your very generous bronation on the stream the other day. I didn't get a chance to really shout you out during the thing because we were in the middle of talking to nerds, but just know, right here, buddy. But yeah, enjoy this stream. Okay, so this is clumsy too. We need to roll back here. Trying to do too much. She was alone again. She'd made a mistake. The horrible plunging feeling she'd felt on the bench at Grayson returned. She couldn't do this again. She couldn't make it on her own. Come back. I'm sorry, I was scared, she pleaded to the orb in her palm, but there was no response. Please, come back. Freya was begging, but she didn't care. She needed the star ball. Why was she fighting it? She closed her hand around it, unsure if it was growing colder, if it was only her imagination. He needs me. She called Dan, but he did not answer. The call went to voicemail. She hung up and tried again and again. On the fourth call, the phone picked up. On the fourth call, the phone picked up. On the fourth call, she could hear the phone pick up, and she recognized the background noise of his room, but Dan didn't say anything. As she strained to hear, she could hear the sound of rapid breathing. Dan? She asked. There was a long pause before he could reply. Hey, Freya, I'm sorry, he trailed. His voice was thin and strained. No, it's okay, she assured him. I was just worried about you. I think I was having a panic attack. I just took some Klonopin. I'm trying to calm down. I know how you feel, she said. Everything's going to be okay. What's happening to me? He asked, tension rising in his voice. Just breathe. Take a second. I'm right here. I'm freaking out. When you were playing the song, you felt that too, right? I'm not just imagining it. I felt it too, she said. What about the dream? He asked. What about the dream this morning? He asked. And her cheeks, he asked. That too. I felt you, she said, and it felt like a confession. Mm-hmm. I just woke up to an alert about a nuclear power plant near me. Oh, shit. Is that the one in fucking near Delaware? No, damn. Good streams. Yeah, I thought we did have like it's a good show on Friday night. Really enjoyed that. That too. I felt you, she said, and it felt like a confession. The words were monstrous, huge things that she could barely force out of her mouth. Oh, that doesn't work. They were monstrous words. That too. I felt you. I was you, she said, Freya said, and it felt like a confession. They were monstrous words. She could barely force them out of her mouth. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, each of them trying to assemble what it all meant. I'm afraid, Dan said at last. I've never felt anything like this. He was speaking slower and faintly slurring. I haven't either. You don't have to be afraid. I'm with you. I wish you were here. He said it quickly, like he'd meant to hold back, but the words had escaped him. There was a rising feeling in her chest. She shut her eyes and felt nothing but joy singing upwards. It was all she wanted to hear. I wish you were here too, she said, her voice wavering. I'll try to explain, but it might be hard over the phone. I'm not really sure what's happening either. The Klonopin will hit me soon. I may pass out, Dan said. His voice was getting heavier by the word. If you tell me now, I might not remember. Can we talk tomorrow? She had a twisting feeling. She'd only said he wished she was there because he was drugged. Klonopin. Oh, yeah. 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 K-pins. Let's see. I think we fucked up the other. I just took some Klonopin. She had a twisted feeling, worrying he'd only said he wished she was there because he was drugged. Sure, we can talk tomorrow, she said, trying not to sound bitter. I'm supposed to take the test, the ASVAB in Quincy. Maybe we can go running after school. I like that. Sleep well. It's gonna be okay. Thank you, he said. Good night, Dan. Sweet dreams, Freya, he said, and then he was gone. She held the phone against her ear for a few minutes longer, clinging to the sound. At last she plugged in her phone and set the star ball in its ring on her nightstand, excited and afraid. She turned off the light and leaned back, interlinking her fingers over her heart. I wish you were here, he'd said. She wanted to stay at that place forever, and she drifted away, chasing after the memory. Little weird. little chonky at the end of our chapter right there. So we have a Starball, so I think 55 is a Starball chapter. All right, so 56. Woo, my word, benzos are poison. Also, did we pick up the pace this chapter? It seems moving quick. No complaint, just wondering. Let me see. Yeah, that chapter. I think let's go back to here. Yeah, the whole chapter. We need to re-go through this tomorrow. Okay, so shout outs to making it to 395 pages, which is where we need to be. And that chapter we need to redo tomorrow. Absolutely. Really and truly. But we made it to 400 pages. So cool. So day 39 is where we get halfway through, which means that we may finish this around day 79, which would be chill as fuck. All right, so let's try here. Okay, Command C. File, new, blank, school report, and then look at that. Okay, so yeah, and we made it to 100,000 and 103,000 words. So yeah, I think we can fairly say we're halfway through this now. There was a sentence that could have had a semicolon intervention. Fuck these semicolons, man. I'm so tired of them. Okay, but yeah, we did okay work there. So let's go ahead and delete that guy. It's like the most ass backward workaround for getting to this. So let's go Command Shift G. Oh, weird. It's weird that how did that pop to there? I have no idea. Okay, and then we're going to start over at the start of this chapter. So chapter 56 is, again, like the chapters grow longer as we go here. More stuff is happening in each chapter too. And for the remainder of the book, we'll have less reflection and more direct action. So we're 2 claws, smashing maniac. All right, yeah. And I'm starting to feel like it was a terrible mistake to take aspirin on an empty stomach, which I totally should not have done. Control Command G for pages. Okay, yeah, I did Command Shift G, so I don't know how it got us there. Okay, so this is not the only editing session for today. I definitely want to get a second session in later today, but for right now, I'm gonna grill up some sausages and end this for right now. So I'm gonna leave y'all with the intro. Thank you so much for being a part of the editing stream. Yeah, look for another one like mid-afternoon, and I may also try and do some recording on survival mode. Penis bump.